And then Prabhupada dismissed us all. Then he called me back. And he pointed to 64 million. He said, "This is all your credit. 64 million. I know, Prabhupada, it's all your credit. You are so encouraging to us." So he said a couple of nice things like that about me. You don't need a GBC. He doesn't need a GBC. All this credit is his. And I'm sure, he said about others in different ways also. And for them it was true. For me it was just encouraging words that he was giving. But this was later, but in 1975, when he said he doesn't need a GBC, that year they passed a resolution that no one will take sannyas unless they're recommended by the GBC and they wait for 1 year. And so that was approved by Prabhupada. And then in Vrindavan, in 1975, Prabhupada, of course, went to Vrindavan, and I was there, and I was very, very ill, very sick. But I was very enthusiastic to carry on. I had amoebic dysentery. I weighed 118 pounds. My ribs were sticking out everywhere. And the Chitananda Swami suggested, you should take sannyas. You're a very renounced kind of person, he said. So others had suggested, and Ramaswar had already tried to get Prabhupada to give me sannyas earlier. And so I didn't think much of it, but I got some deep realization when Prabhupada opened the Krishna Balaram temple. We had all worked so hard to sell books and raise money, and others directly raised money for the opening of the temple. It was a great struggle for Prabhupada. And I saw him doing that arti to Krishna Balaram. At that time I was so touched, so deeply touched, that such a wonderful thing Prabhupada wanted so much. It's been done, and somehow we've been instruments in this. The glory of watching him offer the arti to Krishna and Balaram. It was so wonderful that I couldn't... Vishaka was behind me. And, she was a photographer for the preaching and so forth. And there was quite a push and a shove to get close to Prabhupada and witness this. And I was pushing and shoving, and she was behind me, and she was trying to pull, and she said, "Maharaj, it's for the preaching." Because preaching was so important, to get forward. And she wanted me to let her in front of her, and I said, "The hell with the preaching." I'm not moving from here, I'm going to watch this. Moment in eternity, Prabhupada offering arti to Krishna and Balaram. Anyway, I got so much inspiration at that time. Hansaduta was there, and tears were flowing from his eyes like anything, and standing next to me, and I was also choked up and crying. And I thought I must take all formal steps to dedicate myself to Prabhupada in every way. So I went to Prabhupada, and they didn't even want to let me in, whoever his secretary was, but I got in anyway. And I told him, "Prabhupada, I think I'd like to take sannyas." But I was so submissive. My nature was, I'm known to be very independent in some ways, and like a maverick and rebellious, but really there's both sides to me. And to Prabhupada I was very, very, very submissive. And I was afraid to ask anything of him, to ask anything. "You do something for me, you give me sannyas. If you don't want it," the message I was trying to send, "I don't want it." But I'm thinking that maybe you'll want it, and I want it only because I have some idea that it will draw me closer to you by making that kind of commitment. So I tried to explain all these things to Prabhupada when he asked why you should take, and he kind of played with me. He said, he knew me, of course, and he said, "So you are brahmachari?" And I said, "Oh, Prabhupada, it's me, Tripurari, it's me." I was thinking in my mind. And I said, "I had a wife when I joined, but then she left," and he said, "Oh, Vanaprastha." And so he was kind of playing with me, and he said, "So you will be taking, if you take sannyas, then what if you give it up?" I said, "Prabhupada, I would never do that." I thought, it's out of love, I want to do this for you. He said, "Others have said, and they have gone." And I thought, well, maybe he doesn't want. So I kind of thought, gosh, I don't want to force my idea on the higher. This is not bhakti. Bhakti is to take their idea and do their bidding, not to impose my idea upon them. So I went a little further and explained in relation to preaching, and mostly it was hidden motive. As I said, I want to get into your quarters whenever I can, and I just feel I want to be as closely connected with you as possible, and you can get one initiation, you can get two, you get three, so I want all three. So then he said, I backed off. I said, "Well, anyway, Prabhupada, I don't want to push it and anything." And He didn't say no, he didn't say yes, he was kind of amused by it. And then I thought, I should do the right thing. And so I went to every GBC member who was there, and I told them I'm thinking of taking sannyas. And they had just passed a rule that you couldn't do that. But they had also just been told he doesn't need a GBC. So I guess they took that to heart, and none of them opposed me except Brahmananda. He's the only one. Prabhupada gave this order, and it have to be recommended. And I guess my adherence to them at that time was maybe a little bit superficial, because I heeded everyone's advice except Ramananda's. He said no, and everyone else said yes. Or maybe I just took it the majority roles here. And when I went to Tamal Krishna Maharaj, he had heard Srila was talking to different GBCs about taking sannyas, and when it came to him, and I came and asked me, he said, yes, you should do it immediately. Let's go to Prabhupada. So he dragged me back down to Srila Prabhupada. And then he said, Prabhupada Srila wants to take sannyas. And all of us think it is a wonderful idea. So Prabhupada says, then tomorrow he will take sannyas. So my sannyas was kind of in violation of the GBC resolution in a sense.
Then Srila Prabhupada asked if we had any questions, again, as he did after the lecture. So I had been studying, I think I had read the Bhagavad Gita, that little blue one we had. I think by that time I had read it about 12 or 14 times. I was a very avid reader. And one of my favorite parts was the modes of material nature. And being very philosophical in nature, I wanted to understand some of the more refined and subtle points. And so I said to him, I'm confused because throughout your books and in your lectures you say that when you become a devotee, you're on the transcendental platform. But at the same time, you talk about being affected by the modes of material nature. And although I'm a devotee, and I'm practicing the principles of devotional service, and experiencing a certain amount of transcendental pleasure, at the same time, I feel affected by the modes of material nature. So how is it that I could be on the transcendental platform and still be affected by the modes of material nature? And he smiled. He liked that question. He saw that it was thoughtful and introspective. And he said, that is a very good question. And he said, it is just like being on a boat. He said, when you're on the boat, no one can say you're not on the boat. You're on the boat. He said, but when you sail on the boat, sometimes very big waves will come and rock the boat. And so your position on the boat will not be very steady. He said, those waves are the modes of material nature, and the boat is the transcendental platform. You're on the transcendental platform, but sometimes the waves of material nature rock the boat, and your position is not steady. He said, so how will you become steady? He said, then you have to learn from the captain of the boat, that is the spiritual master, how to steer the boat. And if one learns expertly from the captain how to steer the boat, then even in the greatest storm, your position in the boat will become steady. He said, so similarly, on the transcendental platform, if you learn from the spiritual master how to steer the boat of transcendence through the ocean of material life, then you will become steady even in the greatest storm of the modes of material nature. I was extremely impressed at how Prabhupada had taken a complex situation and explained it with a very simple analogy.
One analogy he gave was in 1966 or 67, he began his Prahlad Maharaj series when Prahlad would speak to his classmates when his teachers were out. And one example was about in an airplane, you have a driver and a motor. Without the motor, the plane doesn't run. And without the driver, even with the motor, the plane doesn't run. So without the soul in the body, even if you have all the mechanical arrangements, the body doesn't work. And then he said, if you take a teeny drop of poison, like ptomaine poison, even though the body is so big and so complicated, if you put one small drop of ptomaine poisoning in it, life is finished. So why not, if you have a little tiny soul, 1/10,000th of tip of the hair, if that's in the body, it brings the whole body to life.